The sun dipped low, casting golden rays through the leaves of the old oak tree, its branches swaying gently with the breeze. Emma leaned her head against Liam's shoulder, their fingers tightly intertwined, as if letting go would unravel the promises whispered between them. This tree wasn't just wood and leaves. It was their witness, standing tall through every laugh, every stolen glance, every vow of forever. "I can't believe how far we've come," Emma murmured, her voice soft, almost fragile, as if speaking too loud might shatter the moment. Liam smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "And we've got a lifetime to go." But somewhere in the distance, beyond the rustle of the leaves and the warmth of their shared dreams, fate was already weaving a different story. A story neither of them could see coming. Because sometimes, love isn't tested in the quiet moments. It's torn apart in the storms you never expect. The morning light streamed through the thin curtains as Emma sipped her coffee, the familiar warmth of their small kitchen wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. Liam hummed softly, flipping through the newspaper, his presence a steady anchor in her life. They had been through rough patches before. Arguments, job losses, even the heartache of losing loved ones. But they had always found their way back to each other. Their love was a fortress, built brick by brick through years of shared struggles and quiet triumphs. But that morning, everything shifted. A sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Emma glanced at Liam, her brow furrowing slightly. It was too early for visitors. She opened the door to find an envelope resting on the mat. No return address, just their names scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting. A chill crawled up her spine. Liam took the letter from her trembling hands, his brow knitting together as he tore it open. The words inside were few, but they sliced through the room like a blade. His face paled, the color draining from his cheeks as his eyes scanned the page. "What is it, Liam?" Emma's voice wavered, her heart pounding in her chest. He looked up, eyes dark and distant, as if he were suddenly 1,000 miles away. It's something I never thought we'd have to face." And just like that, the clouds gathered. The storms they'd survived before felt like mere drizzles compared to the tempest that was about to consume them. "How can we survive this?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. Tears welled up, blurring her vision until Liam's face became a hazy outline, his features tight with worry. She clutched the letter in her trembling hands, its words burning into her mind like an inescapable nightmare. Liam pulled her into his arms, holding her close, but the warmth she usually felt in his embrace was missing. His silence wrapped around them, heavy and suffocating. He always had the right words to ease her fears, to make her believe they could conquer anything together. But now, his quiet spoke volumes, louder than any confession. Emma felt a sob rise in her chest. If Liam didn't believe they could get through this, how could she? The day Liam boarded that plane, Emma felt an invisible thread snap inside her. They had always promised each other that love could conquer anything. But now, as the days stretched into weeks, that promise felt like a distant echo. The distance between them wasn't just measured in miles. It was the growing silence, the missed calls, the unanswered texts. Liam's new job overseas was supposed to be their golden ticket, a chance for a better future, a life they had dreamed of building together. But with every passing day, Emma wondered, was the cost too high? She stared at his name flashing on her phone screen, hesitating before answering. Even when they spoke, there was a hollow space between their words, filled with things neither of them dared to say. Could their love survive this separation? Or was it already slipping through their fingers, like sand they couldn't hold on to? Days melted into weeks, each one heavier than the last. Emma's phone became her lifeline, a constant companion in her growing solitude. She'd stare at the screen, willing it to light up with Liam's name, her heart leaping at every notification, only to sink when it was anything but him. The silence was louder than any argument they'd ever had. She replayed their last conversation in her mind, searching for signs she might have missed. Had his voice sounded distant? Were his words colder? Was Liam drifting away? But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered something darker. This wasn't like him. Something wasn't right. And as each unanswered call echoed into nothingness, Emma's fear grew. Not just that Liam was slipping from her heart, but that something else was pulling him away entirely. Late one night, as the city outside her window buzzed with life, Emma sat alone in the dim glow of her bedside lamp. Her fingers traced the edges of an old, worn photo tucked inside a forgotten drawer. It was a snapshot of simpler times, her and Liam, laughing beneath a blanket of stars, their faces lit with pure, unfiltered joy. His arm was wrapped around her shoulders, her head thrown back mid-laughter, as if the world outside their little bubble didn't exist. Staring at that frozen moment, a lump formed in Emma's throat. Was that happiness now just a relic of the past? Had they lost the magic that once made their hearts beat in sync? The silence between them felt like an ocean, vast and uncharted. But deep down, a flicker of hope still burned. Maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to that night under the stars. If only she knew how to reach him. Thousands of miles away, Liam sat in a cramped apartment, the city lights outside his window casting long shadows across the room. His phone lay in his palm, Emma's name glowing on the screen like a beacon pulling him home. His thumb hovered over the call button, his heart aching with the need to hear her voice, to feel that familiar comfort only she could give. But he didn't press it. How could he? How could he tell her the truth, the secret that gnawed at him day and night? He wasn't the same man who left. The job that was supposed to secure their future had come with consequences he never saw coming. Every time he thought about calling, the words twisted in his throat, heavy with guilt and fear. So, he sat in silence, staring at the screen, knowing that every minute he stayed quiet, the distance between them grew deeper. Not just in miles, but in hearts. Emma sat at the cafe, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly as her friends chatted around her, their voices a mix of concern and frustration. "Emma, it's been weeks," Sarah sighed, leaning forward. "You deserve better than this. You need to move on." "Yeah," another friend chimed in. "If he wanted to call, he would have by now." Emma forced a smile, nodding as if their words made sense. But deep inside, her heart screamed a different truth. She knew Liam. She knew the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the way his hand would instinctively find hers in a crowded room. Their love wasn't something you just walked away from. It had weathered storms, survived distance, and grown stronger through every challenge. But now, doubt crept in like a shadow she couldn't shake. Was their love truly unbreakable? Or was this the one storm they wouldn't survive? One evening, as Emma sat by the window, lost in the fading light of the day, her phone buzzed unexpectedly. Her heart leapt, hoping, praying. It was Liam. But when she glanced at the screen, her breath caught. It wasn't Liam. An unknown number flashed across the display, and beneath it, a simple message. "If you want to know why Liam hasn't called, meet me tomorrow at 6 p.m. The old train station. Emma's hands trembled, her mind racing. Who could this be? Was it some kind of cruel joke? Or worse, was Liam in trouble? Her heart pounded with fear and curiosity, battling between the urge to ignore it and the desperate need for answers. One thing was certain. This wasn't random. Someone knew something, and Emma wasn't about to let the chance slip away. The next evening, Emma stood beneath the flickering lights of the old train station, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was thick with anticipation, every shadow stretching longer as the sun dipped below the horizon. She clutched her phone tightly, replaying the mysterious message over and over in her mind. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man Emma didn't recognize, his face etched with worry. Without introduction, he handed her a small envelope and whispered, "Liam didn't want you to know, but you deserve the truth." With trembling fingers, Emma tore it open. Her eyes scanned the letter, each word hitting harder than the last. Liam was in trouble, serious trouble. The job overseas wasn't just demanding. It had pulled him into something dangerous, something he couldn't escape from easily. He hadn't called, not because he didn't care, but because he was trying to shield her from the chaos he'd fallen into. Emma's knees weakened, her mind spinning. She wasn't ready for this. The man she loved was drowning in a world she never saw coming, and he had been suffering alone, all to protect her. Emma stood frozen on the cold platform, The letter crumpled in her shaking hands. The words blurred, not from the fading light, but from the tears welling in her eyes. Liam had been fighting battles she never knew existed, carrying a burden too heavy for one person. And all this time, she had been waiting, hoping, while he was out there, alone. Her friends' voices echoed in her mind, telling her to move on, to let go. But how could she? How could she stand by, knowing Liam was out there struggling, thinking he had to protect her by staying silent? In that moment, the choice wasn't really a choice at all. Her heart spoke louder than her fears. She couldn't wait in silence, not anymore. She would risk everything, her comfort, her safety, even her heart, to find him. Because love wasn't just about promises under the stars. It was about standing beside each other in the darkest of storms. And Emma was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Emma clutched her passport with trembling fingers as she sat by the gate, the airport buzzing around her like white noise. Her heart raced, each beat a mix of fear and fragile hope. She didn't have a plan, just an address scribbled on the back of that mysterious letter and the desperate need to see Liam again. When they called her flight, she moved on autopilot, her legs carrying her down the jet bridge as if guided by something greater than herself. As the plane ascended into the night sky, Emma stared out the window, wondering what she'd find on the other side. Was Liam safe? Would he even want to see her, knowing the danger that shadowed him? She didn't have answers, but she knew one thing for certain. She had to try, because sometimes love wasn't about knowing what lay ahead. It was about leaping into the unknown, hoping the person you love was waiting on the other side. Emma's heart pounded as she navigated the unfamiliar streets, the city's chaos swirling around her. The address led to a worn-down building tucked between towering structures, its faded walls whispering stories of secrets and struggle. She climbed the narrow staircase, each step heavier than the last, until she stood before a door that felt like the final barrier between her and the man she loved. Taking a shaky breath, she knocked. The door creaked open, and there he was. Liam, but not the Liam she remembered. His face was thinner, shadows carved beneath his eyes, his shoulders weighed down by burdens she could only imagine. He looked like a man who had been fighting a war with no end. Yet, when his eyes met hers, all the fear, all the distance melted away. In those familiar eyes, Emma saw the same love, the same unwavering promise they'd made beneath the old oak tree. His lips parted, as if to speak, but no words came. He didn't need to say anything, because in that moment, they both knew. No matter how broken the world around them was, their love remained unshaken. They stood in the dimly lit doorway, the air thick with everything they wanted to say but couldn't. The city's noise faded into a distant hum, leaving only the sound of their breathing, uneven and heavy. Emma's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she took in the man before her, the man who had disappeared, not out of neglect, but out of fear. Liam's gaze dropped to the floor, his shoulders sagging under the weight of secrets he'd carried alone for too long. His voice, when it finally broke the silence, was barely more than a whisper. "I thought I'd lose you if you knew." Emma's heart clenched. Those 6 words carried all the pain, all the fear, all the love he'd been too scared to share. She stepped closer, her hand gently lifting his chin until their eyes met again. "You never had to protect me from the truth," she whispered back, her voice trembling but sure. "You only risk losing me by shutting me out." In that fragile moment, the distance that had once separated them felt smaller. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with understanding, with love that had endured more than either of them thought possible. Emma's tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and uncontrollable, blurring the worn lines of Liam's face. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling as they laced through his, grounding them both in the moment neither of them had the strength to run from anymore. "I promised forever, Liam," she whispered, her voice breaking but her heart steady. Not just the easy parts, but all of it. Together. Liam's breath hitched, his eyes glistening with a mixture of guilt and relief. He had spent so long trying to shield her from his darkness, convinced that loving her from a distance was the only way to keep her safe. But here she was, standing in the middle of his chaos, refusing to let go. For the first time in weeks, Liam let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, forever wasn't lost. Because Emma wasn't just a promise he made under the stars. She was the anchor pulling him back from the edge. And together, they could face whatever came next. In that fragile, silent moment, as their fingers intertwined and hearts beat in sync once more, Emma and Liam understood something deeper than all the promises they'd ever made. Love wasn't about perfect moments beneath the stars or flawless plans for the future. It wasn't about always knowing the right words or never making mistakes. Love was messy, complicated, and sometimes painful, but it was real. It was about standing in the darkest places and still choosing each other. It was about weathering storms, facing fears, and holding on even when everything felt like it was falling apart. They didn't have all the answers. Their world was still uncertain, the road ahead unclear. But as long as they were together, they knew they could face anything. Because true love wasn't about perfection. It was about fighting through the imperfections, side by side. And in that, they found their forever. Life had thrown its fiercest storms at them, testing every promise, every whispered forever they'd shared beneath that old oak tree. But standing there now, with Liam's hand wrapped tightly around Emma's, they realized something powerful. Love wasn't proven in the easy moments. It was forged in the trials they'd endured. They had faced distance, silence, fear, and secrets that could have torn them apart. But instead of breaking, their hearts had found their way back to each other, stronger than before. The cracks life had carved into them didn't weaken their bond. They made it unshakable. With the weight of the past behind them and the unknown future ahead, Emma and Liam walked forward, hand in hand. They didn't know what challenges tomorrow would bring, but they knew one thing for certain. Whatever life held next, they would face it together. Because love had tested them one last time, and they had won.